You owe it to yourself. That's what people say, right? Like it's some kind of gentle reminder to treat yourself better. Buy that thing you've been eyeing, take that vacation, indulge a little. But what if I told you that phrase actually carries a weight so heavy that most people spend their entire lives running from it? What if you owe it to yourself isn't about comfort at all, but about something far more demanding, far more uncomfortable, and far more necessary? Because here's the truth nobody wants to hear. You don't owe yourself relaxation. You owe yourself the hardest possible version of your life. And if you don't pay that debt, you'll spend your years drowning in bitterness, resentment, and regret. If you're the kind of person who's tired of half-living, who suspects there's more to life than just getting by, then make sure to subscribe to this channel, because what we're about to explore isn't comfortable, but it might be exactly what you need to hear. Let's start with something uncomfortable. Life is brutally difficult. It's short, it's unpredictable, and it has a nasty habit of kicking you when you're already down. Now, you have two choices when faced with this reality. The first choice is to hide, to play it safe, to avoid risk, avoid responsibility, avoid putting yourself out there because, well, what's the point? Everything ends anyway. This is the path of least resistance, and it's the path most people take without even realizing it. But here's what happens when you choose that path. You become bitter. And when you become bitter, you don't just stop contributing to the world, you actively start destroying it. You become the person who tears others down, who mocks people for trying, who finds satisfaction in watching others fail because at least then you're not alone in your misery. The second choice? Flip the script entirely. Recognize that since life is short and brutal anyway, since you're all in whether you like it or not, you might as well go all in on purpose. You might as well take the risks that actually mean something. You might as well chase the adventure.
And this is where we get to the real debt you owe yourself. The obligation to live truthfully. Not comfortably, not safely, truthfully. Most people spend their entire lives manipulating reality with their words. They craft what they say to avoid responsibility. They twist their language to gain advantages they don't deserve. They lie to themselves about what they want because confronting the truth is too painful. And on the surface, this seems smart. After all, if you can manipulate your way through life, why wouldn't you? Here's why. Because you're not actually a good judge of what you need. You think you want comfort, but what you actually need is meaning. You think you want safety, but what you actually need is growth. And when you manipulate reality instead of confronting it, you lose something irreplaceable. You lose adventure. Think about it. If you're constantly controlling outcomes, constantly manipulating situations to get what you think you want, you know exactly what's going to happen. There's no surprise, no discovery, no transformation. But if you commit to speaking the truth, to acting with genuine integrity, you have to let go of control. And yes, that's terrifying, but it's also exhilarating. Because when you stop trying to control everything, you don't know what's going to happen next. And maybe, just maybe, that uncertainty is where all the best parts of life are hiding.
Plus, when you live truthfully, you have something most people never access. You have the force of reality behind you. Think about what that means. When you're trying to manipulate reality, you're fighting against it. You're constantly swimming upstream, constantly expending energy to maintain your delusions. But when you align yourself with truth, when you act with genuine integrity, reality becomes your ally. The universe stops fighting you and starts working with you. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this sounds nice in theory, but what does this actually look like in practice? Let me tell you what it looks like to not pay this debt. It looks like waking up in 10 years and realizing you've become the person you used to mock. It looks like watching people succeed and feeling a twisted satisfaction when they fail. It looks like carrying a resentment so deep that it poisons every interaction you have. It looks like becoming a force for darkness in the world, not because you're evil, but because you hid from the challenge of becoming who you could have been. The difficult part about the debt you owe yourself is the person you could become is also your harshest judge. That ideal version of you, that person who took the risks and lived truthfully and didn't hide. Comparing yourself to that person is almost unbearably painful. The gap between who you are and who you could be might be so vast that you can't even look at it without feeling paralyzed. And this is where most people give up. They look at that gap and think, it's too far. I'll never make it. Why even try? But here's what you need to understand. You're not supposed to close that gap in one giant leap. You're supposed to break it down into steps so small that you can actually take them. If you're finding value in this perspective and you want more content that challenges you to grow rather than just making you feel good, don't forget to subscribe. We're about halfway through, and the second half is where this really comes together. Let me tell you about a principle that changed how I think about progress. To those who have everything, more will be given, and from those who have nothing, everything will be taken. Sounds harsh, right? Almost cruel. But it's describing something real about how momentum works in life. When you're moving upward, your progress accelerates. Each small victory makes the next one easier. You gain confidence, competence, connections, resources. Success breeds success in a geometric, almost exponential way. But when you're moving downward, you don't decline slowly. You fall off a cliff. You lose confidence, opportunities disappear, skills atrophy, and each failure makes the next one more likely. The good news hidden in this harsh reality? It means your first steps don't have to be impressive. They can be embarrassingly small. They can be steps that make you cringe at your own inadequacy. Because once you get the ball rolling upward, it doesn't roll in a straight line. It accelerates. Let me give you a concrete example of what this looks like. Imagine you want to start going to the gym, but you're completely out of shape. You walk in and you're surrounded by people who look like they were carved from marble, and you can barely lift the empty bar. It's humiliating. Your ego screams at you to leave, to wait until you're in better shape before you come back, which of course makes no sense, but that's what the ego does. But here's the thing. If you take that first humiliating step, and then another, and another, within 3 months, you won't recognize yourself. Within a year, you'll be the person other beginners look at and feel intimidated by. Not because you made one giant leap, but because you were willing to be embarrassingly weak at the beginning. This applies to everything. Want to start a business? Your first attempts will probably be terrible. Want to learn a new skill? You'll be incompetent at first. Want to be more honest in your relationships? Your first attempts at vulnerability will feel awkward and scary. But the humiliation of starting is the price of admission to the life you actually want. Now here's where people get stuck. They compare themselves to the wrong group. You scroll through social media and compare yourself to the top 1% of performers in any given field. You listen to the most articulate thinkers, watch the most talented athletes, study the most successful entrepreneurs, and then you feel like a failure because you're not at their level. But that comparison is insane. Those people aren't your peer group. You know what your real peer group is? You, yesterday. That's it. That's the only comparison that matters. Because here's what you don't see when you're comparing yourself to some successful person. You don't see the decades of work they put in. You don't see their unique advantages and disadvantages. You don't see the private struggles and costs of their success. You're comparing your messy, complex, fully realized life to a thin slice of someone else's marketed highlight reel. You want to be that successful person, but what you really want is to have all their advantages with none of their problems. And that's not how reality works. You have to take the good with the bad. Always. So, what's the practical application of all this? What does it mean to actually pay the debt you owe yourself? First, make a plan. Not a vague wish, not a daydream, but an actual plan for who you want to become. What are you interested in?
What responsibilities are you willing to take on? What contribution do you want to make to the world? And yes, allow for the possibility that your contribution actually matters, that the world would be lesser without it. Second, get disciplined about something. Anything. It doesn't matter what it is. The discipline itself is what matters. Because discipline in one area of your life bleeds into every other area. Third, stop treating yourself like a servant and start treating yourself like someone you have to negotiate with. You're not good at forcing yourself to do things. Nobody is. So instead of cracking the whip and then procrastinating in endless cycles, actually set up a life you want to live. Schedule your days not as a prison of obligations, but as a structure that supports the life you're trying to build. The brutal truth that ties this all together: if you try something half-heartedly, you get to protect yourself from failure. You can always tell yourself, well, if I really tried, I could have succeeded. And you can tell yourself that comfortable lie for your entire life. But that's not protection from failure. That's the absolute guarantee of failure. Because if you want something worthwhile, something difficult, something that would actually constitute an adventure, what are your chances of getting it if you're only halfway in? You can't be halfway in, not with the things that matter. And yes, going all in means you might fail completely, but at least then you'll know. At least then you'll have actually lived, instead of spending your entire existence on the fence, telling yourself comforting lies about what you could have done if only you'd tried. So what do you owe yourself? You owe yourself the hardest possible version of your life. You owe yourself truth over comfort. You owe yourself the adventure of not knowing what happens when you stop trying to control everything. You owe yourself the embarrassment of starting at the bottom. You owe yourself the risk of going all in on something that matters. Because the alternative isn't just a lesser life. It's bitterness, resentment, and becoming a force that tears down instead of builds up. And I promise you, that debt will come due either way. The only question is whether you pay it by building something meaningful or by drowning in the regret of what you never attempted. And that's where I'll leave you today. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is your moment. Hit that subscribe button because you owe it to yourself to keep exploring ideas that challenge you to grow. Drop a like if this resonated with you, and keep the momentum going. There's another video on your screen right now that dives even deeper into building the life you actually want. Don't just watch, take action. I'll see you in the next one.